Hello and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. This episode, we will be continuing our discussion on Funeral for Flaca by Emily Prado. This episode, we will be discussing our top and favorite moments in the second portion of the essay collection.
Hey guys.
Nice intro.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, nice intro. So today we're going to start looking into the second half of the book. We have quite a few things we want to mention. I know in the first part, we kind of went chapter by chapter. This time we're just going to kind of pick different places from the book, different strong lines, maybe talk a little bit about the song choices, and see how that goes. If that sounds good to y'all.
Yeah.
All right. So we're starting with track 7 or around that area. I think we started talking a little bit about this last time. So Rich, So Pretty. And how this is kind of the transitional point in the book in adolescence where Emily discusses her eating disorder, how that started. She's 14 at this point. I did have a couple of lines here that stood out to me. And then Vanessa, if you want to jump in with anything that you'd like to say about this chapter. But for me, I really appreciated how real and how raw she got in this chapter. She does discuss something that just is really relatable to any, woman reading this book can really relate to. On page 66, she says, "I'm reminded of the impending doom that is a woman's body," which again is really real, and just the attention to what she refers to as impending doom, which might to some people sound like it's being extra or, dramatic in some way, but to a lot of us, especially at that age, right, 13, 14, around that age where it's all about image and it's all about body and it's the changes and she's already kind of led up to that in the book with brands and, the image that she's portraying and who she wants to be and trying to find that identity. And so here, in the middle of the book, she's guiding the reader to the nickname Flaca and how Flaca was such a huge part of that identity.
I mean, and that's interesting because the frame, the context behind that statement there is kind of what's framed by her mother, right? Telling her better enjoy it while it lasts. And we talked about this previously in part 1. I'm discussing the first part of the book where she was talking about eating chips as a kindergartner, right? And we didn't. I mean, it's not said, but we were saying that somebody probably mentioned it, right? Same thing, like about how she was a little self-conscious of eating more than the boys or whatever. And so you see it here, straight up said by her. So in that context,
I think also touching on something that I really related to on page 70. She says, I come to realize that as a size 3, fitting into my friend's 0 or 1 jeans is going to be difficult. And then later it says, the pull-up so her friends end up borrowing her jeans as well, or trying to, but they're bigger on them. So it says, the pull-up motion is singular and unsavory pockets of air appear everywhere, making them unwearable. I don't know. That's something that I really relate to. Especially at that age, because girls do share a lot of clothes. Like I don't know, I don't anymore, but like at that age, especially, was definitely bigger than my friends, I think, or at least curvier. So it was something that I was kind of like, oh wait, okay, it's not just me. So that was nice to read, I think.
Yeah. It just brought to mind that movie, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and how
Yeah.
stupid the whole idea is that like all those women with different sizes and
Yeah.
could fit into the same pair of jeans.
I thought they're not magic. I thought that was like I've never seen it.
Probably.
So
I think
thought
they
like
are,
it was
but
like a
even
act like
still.
you've never seen it.
the world of wizardry kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
they change sizes according to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah. But in reality, back on planet Earth,
It's not real.
that could never. And so, yeah, it does kind of bring to mind that like whole sharing of, oh, I love your shirt, but oh, it doesn't fit me. It doesn't look the same on me. And then you become so much more conscious or aware of your own body and your own curves. And
For sure.
definitely. Yeah, I also wrote in my notes like how the disorder started, and I put in quotes, innocently enough, because she does say like it kind of started by accident, that she was skipping meals, or she was, I think she starts the chapter that way.
Yeah.
Like, I began starving myself by accident, and then purposely, skipping breakfast because she didn't want to be tardy to class. And so I guess that's what I mean by innocently, or she had good intentions behind, skipping meals, not knowing that it was going to result in, this thing that she was going to have to live with for the rest of her life. And I think that's important to note, because it's not always going to look the same way. And, everyone is dealing with their own demons their own way, right? So an eating disorder might look like this to some person, and the next person it's going to be completely different.
And I think also, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think later in that same chapter, I guess, it's about having control. So she's controlling. She feels like her life doesn't have as much control as she would like it to, and in that sense, this is something that she can control. And then on page 79. She says, I will choose to keep waiting. My lifestyle is now a choice I can make. So I think that that's something that's really important. I think, I don't.
Yeah, no, I really like that, that you brought that up, Vanessa. I underlined that part too. Just because it does seem like she's wanting to take control and have power in this one sense, or more agency, but she's still so young and still trying to figure out like how to navigate all of these different parts of her identity. This just happens to be one of them. And it happens to be something that a lot of young women experience, and men too, right? And so I think that's why it makes it harder for her to figure out like, okay, controlling this certain aspect can have its own, I don't know what the word is, like, it can be more detrimental to you in the long run. But at this point, she's like, I'm taking control.
Yeah.
Right? And she feels empowered by it.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I was trying to say. Yeah. And she does mention here the pro-ana community. She talks a little bit about finding community in other people who felt the same way. Or who had eating disorders as well, and were kind of validating her wanting to be thinner, and her idolizing these size 0 celebrities and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So kind of going back to her identity and being a student, and no longer thinking about GPAs, but now she's thinking about the numbers like on her waistline.
Yeah.
Size of her jeans.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the numbers at the very end of that track, right? She talks about she used to ask about my GPA. Now she asks about my weight. Focusing on the numbers. Wait, is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
That's because Val, he distracted me. Sorry.
No, you are on the right, on the right page.
No, that's exactly,
Like, man, I should have locked the door. I knew it. Okay.
No.
My bad. Well, I already have one edit to make.
Out.
You were supposed to.
I know. I'm sorry.
I know we're just like
I froze.
I was mid sentence. I just like kept going.
Okay.
Next time, I got you.
Is there anything else you want to say about this chapter, this section?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Didn't have anything
Track
for
8.
track 8. I don't know if you wanted to mention anything for that.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I really like this song. So when you gonna give it up to me by Sean Paul?
It's Shonda Paul. Shonda Paul.
Oh,
Just kidding.
I was like, oh.
I'm just kidding.
Oops.
How does he say it?
I-
Shonda Paul. No, that sounds like.
Ooh.
Please edit this out.
I'm gonna keep this in.
Oh no. That's why I never say
That's the
anything
best part about being the editor. I get to choose what's out and what stays. It's like, do you like to listen to Sade?
Oh no.
Aw. That's
It happens. That's fine.
that's
that
not
one's
that
different.
that's not as embarrassing
one's
as
different.
me trying to say it. Shonda Paul.
How again?
No.
Yo, I have it recorded, so
I know.
He
I'm gonna
doesn't
save
even
it.
need you to
Fine,
repeat it.
can-
I'm
you
just
can
kidding.
keep it. It's
no,
fine.
I'm gonna edit. We have a lot of editing to do already. Nice job.
Oh no.
Just kidding.
No, you can leave. I don't care.
Okay.
Really don't.
I'm like, anyway. No, okay. So something that I really liked about this one in particular is that she mentions a lot of statistics that I think she feels like she has the possibility of falling into, and I think that are in a sense stereotypical of Latina women. So the first one, right when she starts this essay, it says, "Did you know 1 in 3 Latinas will become pregnant before the age of 20?" And that one I kind of related to this other book that I mentioned in the first episode, The Death and Life of Aida Hernandez.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was reading this essay around the same time I was reading that book. And Aida does happen to become pregnant in high school. So like I was like, oh, okay. So there's like a connection there that I was able to make. I'm not sure how accurate it is. It's something we should probably look into. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And then on the following page, some other, I guess, statistics that she names are of being a brown girl. She says, all my life, I've been dodging the shitty statistics of being a brown girl in America. Most likely to be a dropout, most likely to attempt suicide, most likely to do drugs, most likely to become a teen mom. And then she says how she's already achieved 2 of those. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to have all of these different statistics and look at them as myself, and like check off like which ones I've done. Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
I just did a quick Google search.
Oh,
And it's more than half, 53% of Latinas in the United States become pregnant at least once before age 20. So that has changed since she was, right? Because she's talking about sex ed in this chapter. and
Yes.
How she was just like scared straight, you know, with her sex ed class and all that. But yeah, I think that's an important question and something to think about, definitely, as being part of that demographic, and how many of those have we like dodged, and you know, are we counted in some of these other statistics? And it's also nice to look at, you know, the statistics of how many have a college degree, right? And like it isn't just like Latinas who are pregnant or Latinas who you know, drop out of high school or all the negative statistics out there.
Right. It also makes me just think here in El Paso, like, I want to give a shout out to Iris Lopez, Mija Yes She Can, who, you know, I was listening to a podcast that she was on, and she she brought up a really good point, you know, because considering these statistics, you know, one of the things that people always like to rag on are all the single moms in El Paso,
Mm.
and on this podcast, she made a point to say, like, why do we have to frame it like this, and we should be a little bit more critical. So on your end of, like, also thinking more positive statistics, there's this thing, very much cultural thing in El Paso, to kind of like mock this, but remember that there's also men in that equation too, that either have, or are there, or, like, unfortunately just kind of abandoned or left, or
Yeah.
so a lot of real things here.
Yeah, it's a good point. She's on the news, right? Like,
Yes.
that's her day job.
Mm-hmm.
And Mija, yes, you can follow on social media, but they do some pretty great work, and they're relatively new, a new org. But yeah, I like that. I like the shifting the focus. Like, there's a reason why they're single moms, right? Where are the dads in this
But if you hear
equation?
any of, like, the stand-up comedians, or just
Sure,
any
sure.
social media posts, like, it loves to rag on that. So it's
And I think
aggravating.
you're right about
Yeah.
the whole El Paso thing too. It's like El Paso gets a bad rap for stuff like that. But yeah, there's definitely more to that. There's more to, these women, and just like with Emily in the book, there was more to her.
Yep.
But she was like Vanessa, when Vanessa was reading this, right? Like, you were thinking about how you fit into this, and so I think that's important, right? To take a step back and evaluate, reevaluate, and just, it's something that's never going to end. We're constantly going to be always placing ourselves in these boxes, or in these demographics, in these statistics, because that's just how it is. But what can we do with that, right? With that knowledge, or can we step out of it? Can we do more? And the answer is yes.
Yes, yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Perfect.
That's what I tell my students, and then they just look at me with blank stares.
I feel like you can tell them anything, and they'll they'll be like that.
I know. It's like, are you all even awake?
I've never seen anybody sleep with their eyelids open, but I believe it.
I know.
So that's track 8, right?
Yes. Yeah, she I had put in my notes here, she also talks a little bit about a toxic relationship she was in. But that kind of just leads into the next tracks, the next chapters, where we get to see a little bit more of her relationships. So track 9, Porque me haces llorar. It's a Juan Gabriel track.
Yes. I love the song.
You have to put Juan Gabriel in your playlist. So shout out to Emily for putting some Juanga in there. So I had a few pages highlighted for this track. I really like that it starts kind of lively, not lively, I don't know if that's the word, like, but at the second paragraph, she says, if it takes us 22 minutes to enter a party, it takes at least 2 times longer to leave when we make the rounds again, because more adults have inevitably arrived and the alcohol makes way for the truer, blunter, lengthier things they want to get off their minds. Like, why don't we come around more often? Or if we know our papi loves us. And then she, like, continues in that next page, kind of talking about the different rules that her family has, rules that she's learned, being a part of a big family. So I really like that. I mean, I related a lot to it. You come from a big Mexican family, and you ever go to those parties, like, it's impossible to say hi to everyone or to say bye to everyone in like less than 5 minutes. Like, there's just no way.
Wow.
I really like that. At the end of that section before the break, she says, other rules I've learned: don't talk back. Asking questions is talking back. Don't cry. That's talking back. Say please and thank you. Repeat these with a smile if someone else decides you sound insincere. Dress for parties with a full body commitment. You'll be judged by the smoothness of your hair to the colored polish of your toenails, to the slimness of your waistline and everything in between. Men are heads of the house and can do as they please. Our women aren't afraid to physically fight, even at family parties, and only cry when you can blame the tequila or corridos. Yeah, so I really like that because
Mm.
it just captures, and we know that it's her Mexican family, but it's also our Mexican family. So I love that.
Yeah.
Did you have anything
Yeah.
from this section, Vanessa?
Yeah. So I had 2 lines that I wanted to talk about. So on page 98, one line that really stood out to me that I think is really important, I think, and that just like in terms of when families split up and then there's other siblings that are now introduced to the family. So she's having a conversation with her father, and he says to her, "Don't you think it's not fair that this baby would get part of the house I bought to leave to you and your sister and brother?" And I feel like, so she's like a young teenager at this time, and I think that's a really unfair question to ask someone of that of that age, especially after he chose to leave and have another kid. Like, I don't know. I just thought that was like a really tough question to ask her,
Especially at that age. Yeah. I think that's super. When I read that line, it made me so mad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really, guy? Like, after all the stuff you did and put them through, and you still, like, are able to ask a question like that, which is a question you ask just for the response. You want a response from that. You want a reaction from her. You want her to validate you, right? Which is already crappy in a million other ways, but I think I don't know, after reading it a couple times, I'm like, I kind of appreciate that she just put that in there and let us feel those feelings instead of saying, I couldn't believe that my dad would ask me this. I'm 14 years old, or like those kinds of I don't know, like
No commentary, just
commentary,
left it up,
right?
yeah.
She just left the sentence because she knows that asking that sentence and saying, this is what my dad asked me, is going to get that reaction from the reader. If you're following along, if you're, rooting for Emily, which we are at this point, always have been, right?
Yeah.
I think I don't know, I kind of wish I would have asked her. There's a few things in here and I'm like, man, I wish we would have asked her this, but
yeah, right. Always afterwards.
Yeah.
That's one of those things, right?
Yeah.
Like,
maybe we'll have a chance to interview her. No, I'm kidding. Spoilers. No, we already interviewed her. I guess we should just say that. That's coming up next. But
yes. Yeah. I know. I mean, someone did ask her at the reading at Casa Ortiz something about like her relationship with her father, right? And
yes.
she said we're still kind of a little estranged and this and that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's smart on her end as a writer to know the weight that is going to carry.
To leave it like that. Yeah, absolutely. Great point.
Yeah.
Also, I do have that filmed, so I'll probably release that somewhere, like on YouTube, so people can check it out.
Yeah.
As a reading with Emily and Gris Munoz. In this track, I actually wanted to point out on page 97, just before that, I think Emily has a pretty great paragraph here talking about the nature of truth and how we navigate new information that we uncover, and of course, with her family and just all this information. I just think that with the nature of this genre, as memoir through essay, I think it's a pretty great paragraph. So, how'd you say it? I love the whole paragraph, so I'm just gonna read it. I'm still learning to become a better detective. I can keep track of all the lies of my family, sometimes even my own. It's funny. I learned more about my dad through whispers and hiding than from my dad himself. Our foundational truths are always cracking. When yet another truth is revealed, my brain has to arrange and rearrange the stories anew. I think my memories look like freeze frames superimposed on translucent cards. Sometimes a simple shuffling of the files of chronology is in order. Other times I think my brain tries to patch newly burned holes, or maybe my brain decides sometimes the easiest path forward is to shatter ones altogether. I reread my diary entries and see my obsession with truth as one of few constants. I wonder how long my ability to detect lies has been lacking. I wonder if I will ever relearn how to listen to my gut.
Mm.
I think it's a nice moment of meta awareness of the nature
Mhm.
of truth and memory as well here, but also, how do you manage the information? What do you make with it? I think she has a great way of describing it, but also
Mm.
calling out like this idea of letting intuition take over too as well in your life
Mhm.
instead of being obsessed with, as she says, truth here.
Mm.
So I
So
just wanted to give a shout out to that.
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot about truth and withholding information too.
Mhm.
Like she talks about mommy's secrets, her own secrets,
Mhm.
in this chapter as well. So there's a lot of callbacks to what we've discussed about memory. Um, I really like how she ends this track, um, with that little anecdote about how her mommy outsmarted her dad with a house. So I really
Mm.
love that. Kind of going back to, um, being a single mother and all of the struggles that already comes with, but yet her mother was able
Mhm.
to keep the house and, um, make a name for herself, not have to
Mhm.
depend on Emily's father.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Also, maybe as I might edit this out in case it's not an issue. But if you guys do hear a little bit of background noise, the studio that we're recording in is a very active creative space, and a little bit sometimes schedules conflict, and so we have a theater group called Los Actores that are meeting right now to practice. So no, by the way, if it does sound intense, no one's arguing. They're practicing for a play. You might not hear anything really, but you might hear a little rumbling here and there. So just a
Mm.
little disclaimer. Uh, as I'm editing this and I don't hear it as bad, I'll probably just edit this out. Anyway, continue. My bad.
I know. No, that's good because I sometimes hear them projecting and I'm like, are they louder than me? But no, I don't
Yeah.
think
Speaking of projection, no, I'm kidding.
so.
Bad joke. Bad joke.
Speaking of projection. Okay. Um, so in You Will Always Bring Me Flowers, um, in this chapter, this track, Emily's 21. So we've already jumped a few years ahead. Um, she's graduated with a bachelor's. She graduated early and with honors, which is noteworthy because we've been reading all about her struggles in school and
Mm.
especially middle school. And so now she's graduated. And so if we think back to like statistics and all of that, she's doing well for herself. But I think that's kind of, I don't know. It starts off like, okay, we're happy for her, she's doing so well. But then this chapter talks about her unraveling and having this moment, this period in her life where she, I guess, just unravels and it leads to her being admitted to a psych ward, um, and being diagnosed with bipolar disorder 1. Um, So I have a few lines that I underlined, but I mean, I basically just wanted to give a little bit of that background. And since now we're jumping ahead, maybe like 7, 8 years,
Mm.
from the previous chapter. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that before we get to.
I mean, there's a few things that stood out to me. Um, so she talks about like these visions that she has. Um, and I kind of reflected on that and said, "Wait a minute, I have those visions," and I got kind of scared because So one of the ones that she mentions on page 105, going into 106 actually, she says, I pictured a violent, fiery car crash. I saw us dead, tumbling inside the SUV as it rolled over and over in slow motion. I thought it was a premonition. I really believed I had the power to see the future. I put on my seatbelt and told my friends to do the same.
Mm.
In my case, I've always called them like daydreams, but yeah, like just like really scary things that are happening, like but they're not happening and they haven't happened.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was something that stood out to me. Something else that stood out to me is that she begins to question her sexuality in this one as well. Not necessarily turning away from men, but like questioning, like, oh wait, am I actually also into women?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting the way that she explores that because she talks about how she has like these fantasies with women in a sense, and she just assumed that every girl did this as well. But then she comes to realize that that's not the case. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was really interesting the way that she explored that.
I think going off of that, Vanessa, like on 107,
Mhm.
it's important to note also like the thought process there, because if you don't outright say like I'm queer or I'm this or I'm that, if you're still kind of trying to figure it out, there's everything that people have said about being queer that you can go off of, or what you've seen on TV or whatever. And so I think she explores that here because she says in a lot of places, I thought normal straight girls did, and I thought this, um, and she says, and how I'd still think for many years I was just straight on account of my dating history. I also thought how maybe it was a little bit different. Like, so it's a lot about her thought process. Like, well, I thought this is how it was, but this is how I feel, or this is what I think about, or this is what I fantasize, So I think that that's important too, to just make note of, like, again, that it's not just like something that's black and white or that immediately, or it might be for some people, right? But for others, it might be about the exploration, like you said, right?
Yeah.
So she does definitely bring that up here. And I really like how she ends that passage. Eventually, I will come out in writing on Twitter each year on hashtag Bi Visibility Day, and maybe also tucked deep into a book I write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that was it for me on this. I mean, there's a lot that can be said in this
These
track, but
as she gets older, these start to get so much more dense.
mm-hmm.
Which I mean, I think again, appreciate it. You mentioned that too an episode ago, how the voice changes and her experiences, what she's aware of, her thoughts, her musings, and so on. Right.
Yeah.
11.
Yeah, nothing came out. The moldy peaches.
You had a line right there that you liked, Vanessa.
I mean, I have a few.
Okay.
For track 11?
Yeah, but I think the one that I want to talk about the most is on the last page of that essay on 118. So she's reflecting on this relationship that she's had with Dale. And then right before the end of it, she says, I learned I was ready to move on, be done, be healed. This was the second time I knew I would always love Dale and that us not being together was something I'd be okay with. And this essay especially is dealing a lot with closure and her coming to terms with, even though this relationship taught her a lot and she was able to grow a lot, that it was time to like also move on from it. And earlier she says, this chapter of my life had indeed come to a close. And I think that that's something that's kind of important to realize. Like, just because you enjoy the company of this person or they have been there for you in the past, that doesn't necessarily always mean that they're good for you or that you're good for them. And that sometimes you have to do like split apart from this person in order to continue to grow and heal.
Yeah.
I feel personally
That's
attacked
fair.
right now, but okay. Thank you.
Well, that's interesting because, like,
No,
to
I was gonna say
me,
straight facts.
hashtag street facts. I do think it's interesting the juxtaposition of the very next page, 119. All that page is super dope.
Yeah.
I was digging that vibe. She's saying, the first of all, quote Dixie Chicks, right? They say time heals everything, but I'm still waiting. To this whole, like, I wanted it to be this, I wanted to be this, I wanted to be that, I wanted to be that. It could have been this, and kind of drawing up this whole idea of the bootstraps thing, and ultimately just admitting that, but my story will never be about bootstrapping. My story is not simple, nor easy, nor resolved by just being strong. I love the, all right, cool.
Yeah.
It's a nice, like, way to move on. Like, next, like, all right, I see editing ways, right? Not just time wise, but like, all right, here we go, moving forward.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, especially if you're reading these like one after the other. You read the closure one, you're like, okay, close a chapter on that book, and now here's this like self-aware Emily, more
Super
like
self-aware,
resilient.
which I
Yeah,
love so much.
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, it's a big shift for sure. I know I had a couple lines.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot here.
I see that.
Yeah, I like that here. I mean, this is more like recent and in the past few years, and she's talking about like what you said, Richie, and how she became an intern at Bitch Media. And this is, she talks a little bit about, or a bit about sexual assault in this chapter, and kind of just how it unfolded. So I appreciated the honesty in that, but also just how in an instant it almost felt like that happened, and she wasn't aware of it. And if we're reading along with her, we're kind of not aware of it either until it happens. And it's not one of those, like portrayals of rape that you would see, the man forcing himself on the woman in a movie or something like that. It's a lot more complex, almost like smooth in the way that he was doing it. Like, and I think she mentions this too, like how charming he was, and she knew that was like something he was using against her. Anyway, I it's when you're reading it, you kind of have a sense that that's going to happen, and hoping that it doesn't, but it's not always, just like a forcing upon or that drastic in the beginning, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, and it causes a lot of people to doubt themselves if they feel violated in some way, and think about, well, what does that mean, or what does it have to be like? And sometimes people just think of the most extreme drastic thing, but it doesn't have to be.
And she talks a lot about that in this essay as well. Just saying that she didn't feel like she could call it rape, and that it took her a while to be able to recognize that it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And just a lot of the language and the things that a lot of people I think can relate to, like her saying, I didn't want to come off as a bitch, right? Like, I think that's another thing that I know.
Oh man. Yeah.
I know that's another thing that, women have to deal with. It's like, I think you mentioned this too, Richie, maybe last time. I don't know if it was pre-show or during show, but how like sometimes women will bring up the boyfriend right away, even if they don't have a boyfriend, because it's a way of like smoothing or like softening
Just
the blow.
also like a stiff arm, and that for what whack ass reason,
Like,
whatever
why
reason,
can't we just say no?
men will accept that
Yeah.
instead of just no. There has to be like another guy involved. Like what the you know?
Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's a whole other conversation. But but that line where she says, you know, and I didn't want to come off as a bitch kind of also just reminded me of that, right? Like it's a lot about her maintaining her image or being nice or like, you know, not I don't want to hurt his ego, right? Anyway.
Yeah.
It's
It's a lot. No, it packs a lot. Like
there.
there's a lot packed in there.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think that was Herman, right? And then later she brings up Curtis. So these are the two instances of assault that Emily talks about in her book. And I think, unless you have something else you want to mention, Vanessa or Richie, at the end of this section, and it's a long chapter, she does talk about what I put in my note as like the fallout from the call outs, why so many are ashamed or afraid to speak out, which I think is also super important.
yeah.
And not like she had to do that, right? Like Emily could have just given her experience, talked about this, and that was it. But I think she purposely did that because she knows that there are others like her who maybe couldn't name it, who couldn't say like, you know, or this was my experience, but it's not that bad, or it just happened once, or whatever. For whatever reason, they're excusing it or not wanting to come forward because of all the backlash, right? Which is very real. So, you know, the fact that even if you do come out, rehash this trauma like Emily did, you could be deemed like brave. Your accuser might get punished, but you might still not feel any different after the fact, and that's a very real, very possible thing.
Yeah.
You know, just to expect those questions like, well, why did you wait so long? Which she does bring up here too. So it's just a lot in this chapter that, you know, of course, is her experience or her experiences during and after, and how she's had to deal with it even today.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking too, like the whole time is that's one of the many strengths and power in this book of it being written and people reading it is exactly what you were just saying, Raina.
Yeah, there's that line on 134. I didn't feel much else, but I wanted to. I wanted to feel a sense of relief or of pride for having come forward, but nothing really felt changed or fixed inside. And this was after she talks about her first, Herman, who ended up getting fired and, you know, all this stuff, but didn't really, I mean, what happened to her still happened to her. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's obviously like the most important thing. Like, yeah, well, he got what he deserved, like, quote unquote, but
Yeah, I really like the last paragraph in that as well. So she says, justice didn't feel like it was served. I'm still unsure what kind of punishment is the equivalent of leaving a mark on someone else's body and mind forever.
Oof.
I think that line.
yeah,
Because he did get fired, but
he's going to find another job.
yeah,
Like,
and even with that,
you
like
know.
she still has to live with this experience
Right.
and these memories, and that's tough.
So in dreams is another shift. She comes back to Dale here, and we learn about his visit in the ICU and how his family has kind of gone through that trauma before with his sister. It's really beautifully written essay in her remembering their relationship as she's, by his bed in the hospital.
Mhm.
And there's
Mhm.
not really, so she's kind of just remembering for him and trying to think of like what he's thinking and stuff. And of course, later we learn, he gets a little bit better, but
Mhm.
he can't really speak. But what he is able to tell her is that he was dreaming about her while he was bedridden. So it's just a really nice, and the chapter ends with that really beautiful photo of them on
Mhm.
141. But all these moments where she's like, should I even be here? Like, we broke up a
Mhm.
while back. Like,
Yeah.
now it's his family and a bunch of new friends. Like, I don't even belong in this circle anymore. But all the while, he was having this dream about her, or dreaming about her.
Mhm.
So it's really kind of a romantic little memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can skip 14, 15. Those are pretty short. I think 14, she's talking about Concha, but we get to her later, right?
No, that is.
Oh no, that's the
Yes.
chapter. Okay, so
Mm.
chapter 14 is Concha's chapter, or Tia Concha. I like the way that this one is structured because the whole
Mhm.
time she's like, how do I talk about this woman?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because they've given her that responsibility, or they've asked her to write the obituary because she's the writer.
Mhm.
And she's just like, that's a lot on my
Yeah.
shoulders, and having to call and reaffirm like details with her mom and different things. So it's a lot of pressure
Mhm.
for her. But I really like that the chapter we get her kind of grappling with it and feeling that pressure alongside her. And then by the end of it, of course, we get that glimpse of her actual obituary.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then Concha's mix, which is what Emily's contribution other than the obituary is. She created this mix with a bunch of songs, is it like 20 songs that she gave out? They handed out at the funeral. Burned CDs, for those of you who remember those.
A
Pretty-
mix within a mix.
Yes. And that song's on there. I'm your puppet. I'm your pulpit.
I'm your puppet.
Pulpit. Hello, pulpit.
That is a super inside joke.
I forgot to start the podcast that way.
Mhm. Hello, puppets.
Hello, pulpits. Do you have anything to say about that chapter, Concha's chapter?
You kind of talked a little bit about it, but like the way that it's structured, she's like, how would I even write this? Like, who is this even for? And starting on like page 154, it's very much an obituary, in my opinion. Just a lot of different memories combined. What she liked to wear, the kind of music she listened to, who her friends were, her relationship with I'm not sure if it's Jamie or Jaime, but him, and just like her relationship with the family as a whole. One of my favorite parts was the birthday cakes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just like the amount of care that like she had for the family, even though because later on in this chapter she also talks about how she wasn't always there for Christmas. But like for birthdays, she would always make all of them their own cake, and I think that that's really special, and it's a
Yeah.
good memory.
Yeah, it is. I like that she points out that it was reserved for like their generation. Like the younger generations didn't get the special cakes from
Yeah.
Concha. It was just them.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that because she's like, yeah, now we've moved on to like the the hipster places with the overpriced cakes and with good Yelp reviews. But back then, Concha would take the time to make those art cakes, so they were
Yeah.
extra special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right about how it just feels like an obituary
Mm-hmm.
starting on 154. And that's the other question that I thought about after the fact. It's like, was this the actual obituary that you wrote for Tia Concha? That you published in the book? I have a feeling.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it was. And the way that she described her, with her Farrah Fawcett hair and her windbreakers and stuff, listening to
Yeah.
oldies, and there's that great picture of her on 158 right above her mix,
Mm-hmm.
and some great songs on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like this one. I feel like it's a really nice tribute to her. Even though, of course, she's always going to feel like I can't write anything that's going to live up to the person that she was. But that's just how it is. Tell it like it is. The title.
Perfect ending. Yeah.
I need to find ways to do that with every chapter.
I'm gonna add applause at that point.
We need one of those soundboards.
It's like doing a live episode.
Canned laughter.
No,
No, none of those.
it's every time. No, that's every time I speak or say something.
Not even. Crickets.
What a way to lose confidence. Okay.
Whatever. You're like the epitome of like not that.
Well, derailing
what
the
I
conversation.
mean. I know.
Oh, my bad. So
just edit that out. It's okay.
yeah, it's cool. We're like in an hour, so
okay. You just have like a couple left. I think La Llorona is the one that we were talking about pre-show. The chapter with the tree in the house in Aguililla.
Yes.
Which is already just such a magical like image that when I was reading it, I started thinking about workshop ideas for my students, even though I don't teach creative writing. But I'm already like, my students are going to write something like this. So I really like that image about the tree and she starts talking about ancestry. Is that in this chapter? Talks a little bit about how she has changed her ideas of what body image is. And so I think this is where on page 164, where she really ties it back to the title of the book, The Funeral for Flaca. Because she talks about all the people in Mexico, like all the family who have their apodos, their nicknames. Chucho, Carlingas, Ticho, Toco, Canelo, Gordo, Chayote, Chatilla, Chata, Concha, right? Like, it's great. And she was the Flaca. And then...
By the way, that sounds so great to read out loud. It reminds me of Jose Olivares' Mexican Heaven when he lists all the food. Like it's off the tongue and just like, yeah, all right, speak it. My bad. Didn't mean
you know
interrupt.
what? No, that's a good point because on page 163, she talks about... No, I wrote this in my notes. The translation, maybe she did write about it here too. Yeah, she did. So in that second paragraph, my puppy must have called me his flaca the first time he laid eyes on me, a slippery and noodly 22 inches long, 6 pounds light. Skinny girl doesn't have the same ring to it, like so many other words that lose their poesy by way of translation. But his skinny girl I was. So the note I made, because we're just finishing up Citizen Illegal in my 1302 classes, and we just watched the keynote that he gave this year. I know. So in there, in the keynote, he, just as an aside, he talks about a new poem called something like Mercedes prefers the word discoteca to club.
Mm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And in his poem, he uses the word ojalá. And then when he's talking about ojalá, which is a translation loosely translated to hopefully or God willing,
Damn.
he says, I like ojalá because it seems holy. Like God is a little bit of, like there's a little bit of God in the word. And he talks about how words have different textures, even if there's the same translations or different translations of one another. So
is that the one where he opens like language, like vision can become blurry from a distance? Or is that another one he read?
I think that was a different one.
Damn. Okay. Because I freaking love that line
Yeah.
too, you know?
Yeah.
I think that might have been a different one.
Oh,
But
wow. Okay.
yeah, when she was talking about, I mean, anytime I think or see anything about translation, I remember that and what he mentioned. And yeah, so, Flaca, skinny girl, all those apodos. And she does mention, like, I don't even remember when I lost it. I did not know when my own Flaca was annulled, but maybe it was right after my 21st birthday. There was no coroner, Grim Reaper, who appeared after the scale passed a certain number, nor a memo sent from my father alerting me my nickname was dead. And then in that next paragraph, she ties it back into the tree. So I feel like there's a lot of, that the connections made there. Like there's a reason why she included the image of, not just the image, but the actual tree from this house and how it relates to her name Flaca, because she had Flaca all the way up to this point. And then now the tree's gone, like the family is kind of dispersed, and her nickname is no longer there either, right? What is a name for a grief that creeps in after losing something, mixed with the backdated guilt and shame of not really noticing? What is a nickname for a person who no longer embodies their name? What happens to a person who has become unrecognizable to some? What do we call a tree that's been severed from its roots? A person who's been robbed of their identity. That's a really powerful way to close that section and just come back to that theme of identity and how much names are tied to that or reliant on it.
I think it's especially powerful because I think it's later on in there that she mentions that the tree is no longer there. So not only has she been separated from her roots, so has this tree that has been there through the generations.
Exactly, yeah. I think speaking of roots, track 18, It's My Brown Skin. That's the one she read, I think. Casa Ortiz. Thank you.
She also read
She read
track
a couple.
16.
Okay.
I remember one of the lines, and I
So-
hope people get to hear it. But
Right.
where she says, I could count the rings to tell you how old it is, but I can tell you instead that it was more than 2 embraces wide when I was 7 years old. So I remember that line from when she read it.
Yeah,
was
same
like,
here.
Yeah.
I think we mentioned it. Yeah.
And in track 18, it's just talking about Ancestry.com and how much it really messed with her self identity or sense of self. When she's talking about I am indeed white, despite what I look like, and how I love on page 171. She's really talking about here. Oh, how she has more questions than answers from those DNA tests or whatever. Because all they give you are graphs and numbers and percentages. But I really like how she makes it, I don't want to say abstract because it's not abstract, but on page 171, she says, I want to know what language my abuela's abuela, my tatarabuela, spoke before her tongue was cut out. Which ancestors represent the dirt that gathers behind my ears? Which ancestors represent the blood that pours from my left nostril?
That's poetry.
It is, right? Yeah. And I don't know that it's really abstract. It's like she just, in fact, she's really wanting more specifics, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm 80% indigenous or whatever, but, you know, how does that tie in with my tatarabuela or their language or, you know?
Yeah. I also like on that same page, just a little bit before it, she wrote, "My DNA story screams, you are created from centuries of colonization. The backs of Black and brown people are your stepping stone." And that's just like right after she talks about like the comparison of like what white people would get from ancestry.com. And yeah, I think it's really tough to read that. Just because like they're given such concrete answers, like, oh, my grandma was half Italian, and she says she was just left with more questions. Like she doesn't really know what these percentages mean or like what that means to her own identity as she like has developed it.
Right. Yeah, because it really, like what I said earlier, like it really messed with her sense of self because she's grown up looking brown, being brown, having to deal with, you know, discrimination, racism, and she comes to find out that she's actually white, you know, by blood. And so that messes with you, right? It's like, well, this is what this says, but I've actually experienced this. Or I actually feel that this is more me than what these numbers represent. Whereas what, like you said, you know, those maybe other people might just be like, oh, that's cute. Like, no wonder I like pasta because I'm half Italian.
Yeah.
Not really how that works. But it seems more like a cute little afterthought. But this is learning this for her was like, it just made her question more of who she was. Yeah. What about that last chapter? Closing up the book before the outro. I mean, the outro is just thank yous.
I just had one strong line that I wanted to point out, but it's on 181. I don't know if you have something before then.
No, just to set up the chapter. It's like present time, and she's talking a lot about where she is presently. You know, like trying to heal from all the trauma that she's experienced that we've kind of been on this journey on with her from childhood up until now. And at this point, and the track or the chapter is called Mad. So we do feel that, I think, tone wise, in her receiving an email from Herman, right? Or Herman's people wanting to just like, I don't know, bring back up her trauma for his sake, which of course, you know, no wonder she's mad. But that's basically what this chapter is about. Where's your line? You said 189 or 181?
Right, 181. It's towards the middle of the page. It's a conversation with her mom that she's having. But it's a question that she also asked. It says, "Is this something I'll live with forever?" And that's just such a strong line in my opinion, because we've gone through all of this trauma that she's experienced that you kind of like brought to light again. But like now she's reflecting on it and it's like, okay, when am I able to heal from this? And like, when am I going to be able to not have to think about these experiences? Like, is this something that is going to remain with me throughout the rest of my days? And I I don't know. I really liked that line.
Yeah, that's where she talks about PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're, bipolar disorder 1, she had the eating disorder, she's lived through sexual assault, and now because of this email that kind of brought back these emotions for
Mm-hmm.
her, she finds out that she also has PTSD. So it's like, it's only natural for her to ask that question
Mm-hmm.
and to want to know if this is something that's just going to keep going, that she'll keep struggling with, as with a lot of people dealing with any kind of trauma or any kind of mental health issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like later in that same page when she says, my mom surprises me with her compassion. Some brains are just wired differently, she says. It's just random. Some are stronger. Different, I whisper, not strong or weak. Which I think is important too, right? Because it's like always like, well, you're strong, you just do this or just do that. Like it's easy for people to kind of offer that
Mm-hmm.
sort of advice, not having gone through it or not understanding it. And Emily does talk a little bit about this in the interview, which is forthcoming. But it doesn't look the same for every person, right? And I think we've mentioned that, like, so she highlights that here: different, not strong or weak, just different. I like also just on page 182, just ending this whole section talking about healing. I'm realizing my 20s have been about surviving. I'm starting to realize my 30s can be about healing. And so like that's where we are.
Yeah. I also like a line right before. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Just one more line. Right before that, I think healing involves picking at scabs and sometimes turning scars back into scabs so that they can become smaller. I think that's a pretty strong line as well. Just like reflecting on the traumas that you have in order to, in a sense, also make them smaller, to like heal from them. And I just think that's a really powerful way of wording it.
And the line after that
And then
says,
It's like you're playing that one game where you
no, because I think it's true. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Vanessa. She says, I think healing might mean turning over the truth and rewriting our memories. I hope healing doesn't mean my erasure. And that's like what she's been doing in this book, right? Like turning over the truth and rewriting our memories. That's what she's been doing, right? Like the whole time. I don't know if I'm remembering this right, but I'm going to tell it how I remember it.
Yeah.
And so she's doing that with her memory in this book, but she's also putting her story out there so that she doesn't get forgotten or erased. And she has been through all of these things. I don't know. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Richie, do you want to talk about that last 5 lines? Monarcas.
What is this pressure
Little
here?
poem.
I mean, it's great. I think it's just going back to her poetic sensibilities. I think even with hoping that this offers us nectar, right? This monarchas molt 5 times before burrowing into their cocoons. I wish I knew I'd had my last bite of milkweed. I think forgiveness may be the final shedding. I think I am still stuck in chrysalis. I know the straw flowers are waiting. It's a nice end to it, right? Because there's still more ahead, right? And then like any playlist, you have an outro and just a great way of giving thanks. And speaking of thanks, I know we like to give thanks to our listeners who participate, who listen, every time we post out a new episode and tune with us to, regardless of book and so on. This time we did have an interactive aspect of the show in which we did ask people to submit their own songs, right? The
Yeah.
soundtrack of your lives, right? Or um
Something like that.
and so what we did is, yeah, do you want to explain what you ended up doing, Vanessa?
Yeah. So Spotify now allows you to create polls on podcast episodes. So we have that open still. On episode 1 for Funeral for Flaca. So you can go in and post 5 songs that you feel define you. And at the end of that, we're kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Combine? What's a better word for combine?
Combine sounds
Okay.
perfect for me.
Not for me.
Synthesizing? I don't know.
I don't know. We put all of those songs into a playlist on Spotify as well, that we will be posting the link to. The playlist.
Curating. Is that it?
Yes,
Oh,
that's the one. That's the one I was
Perfect.
thinking of. Curating. Okay.
Insert applause effect.
Get a soundboard, dude. We need one.
What's up with those grants?
No, I'm working on it.
We're sponsors, you know what I'm
I
saying?
know. Hello, we out there.
So where can we find this playlist? What's up?
Yeah. Okay. So it's on Spotify. We'll be sharing that link with y'all, and if
You
not,
can
you
still
can
add right to the
Yeah.
poll.
You can still add songs to the poll, and the playlist name is "Songs That Define Us." I'm debating making it collaborative. I think that's also an option that we're gonna look into.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, you can just add songs.
So if you're
that you
trying to
feel
add songs and it's possible, then we decided yes.
It's like hours and hours and hours
Right.
and hours
Ah,
of
That's
a
still cool.
playlist.
I don't
That
know.
would be
Be-
cool. Yeah.
eclectic as hell.
Yeah, it's already very diverse, I think.
True.
But
Mhm.
it's very cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Stoked.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Literally Literary, brought to you by Border Census and Power at the Pass. This episode, we talked about the second half of the collection, Funeral for Flaca. Stay tuned for our next episode where we interview Emily herself. If you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep and on Twitter at literallylitep.